Hi, I'm Ralph Albert Thomas, CEO and Executive Director of the New Jersey Society of CPAs. And at this Issues Watch Extra, we have two guests. We have Steve McCarthy, who is an accounting lecturer at Kean University here in Union, New Jersey, right, Steve?
Yes, correct.
And to my left, we have the venerable Jim Hardenberg, our Chief Learning Officer here at the Society. Today, we're going to be talking about the whole aspect of learning. We're in a new triennial reporting period for our members here in New Jersey that began January 1, 2015 and runs through the end of 2017, in other words, December 31st, 2017. And we're anticipating some new changes that are going to be taking place with respect to CPE and how it's delivered, the content and the types of models. And so we're very fortunate to have these two gentlemen here today to share their insights about what they're doing. Steve in the classroom, Jim with our members, and I think in tandem you'll talk about how the landscape is changing with regard to CPE. You know, new technologies are expected to make an impact on the way CPE is delivered in the near future. Steve, you wrote an article recently for the Society, and it appeared in our magazine in our January-February issue of NJCPA, and it was entitled "The Future of CPE Delivery." And you discussed the various types of CPE opportunities that we might soon see. So why don't we start with you, and maybe you could run us through some of the things you talked about in your article and what we, will be looking for.
Well, Ralph, thank you. When we talk about the future, some things are here today, and we'll see. And for people of New Jersey, in the high schools and elementary schools right now, we have the PARCC test, which has created a lot of discussion. And so that is a self-assessment test to test students on the core knowledge in the subjects that they have. And people are sort of nervous today about going forward with those PARCC tests. But I believe that's going to be part of the future, just like the changes in CPE will continue to be part of the future for us.
And in fact, assessment has become one of the big question marks about some of the new delivery methods and models out there. How will you be able to assess what, let's say, Jim will take away from a particular learning module? So why don't you delve into that?
That's, again, correct, Ralph, that assessment will be the big challenge going forward. So in the past, you might have gone into a classroom to take CPE along with 50 other people, and you're sitting in the back row reading the newspaper, and at the end of the meeting, you go home, but you got your CPE credit. In the future, there will be assessment to find out if you know something, if you've learned something during that CPE session. And so the new tools that are coming out are assessing the knowledge that you gained from a CPE session.
So if we're still going to have the live, face-to-face, are you saying that at the end we're going to have maybe a test that similar to what people do with self-study now, or?
Quite possibly. That's how it will be done, and so just using devices, so people could have a smartphone in the classroom, right? And the professor is lecturing and asking people to answer a question midway through, at least to show that you're paying attention going through. If you're on webinars now, there's a requirement on a webinar, in a 1-hour webinar, I think you have to have 4 points that you have to show that you're still awake and log in and answer a question. And so we'll see more of that going forward.
One of the new nomenclatures or things we've heard about is this thing called nanobytes or bytes of learning, where in 10-minute increments you'll get something that I won't say hopefully makes you a little more knowledgeable. So how do you assess what somebody's learned in 10 minutes with a nanobyte?
I'd start by saying, first of all, I'm a big proponent in nanobytes. And so it's just 10 minutes of information being provided to you. So it could be auditors are out in the field and there's a change in a tax law that just came out today. And so you could send something out to them, a YouTube video that's a 10-minute video, and talking about a change in the tax law. And right there, you could have them respond, write 40 words or 50 words back about, do you understand what you just learned? And boom, they're assessed. They see a 10-minute video and they're assessed. And I think the millennials will be the one that will embrace that and use it rather than going to a classroom and taking a 4-hour seminar. But they're in most states now, they don't allow nanobites. They don't allow 10-minute segments.
Not yet.
Yeah.
And so that
yet.
will have to change.
I think we have, what, two states, Jim, that have moved or
Maryland
gravitated?
and Ohio.
Maryland and Ohio.
But I think going forward, we live in the YouTube generation
Yeah,
where
we
people
do.
are watching 2, 3, 4-minute videos and learning something. So I think that's a big part of the future.
What will we think of next? There's also this concept of real-world learning. Now, that's something that's really been, I think, I would say maybe a little controversial, that I could learn something by just having a conversation with Jim here. And then Jim's a very smart guy, by the way, as our Chief Learning Officer. But and really, then how would the assessment work in that regard, where Jim and I are sitting down talking about a particular issue? It may be a new pronouncement that came out and whatnot. How do you know? And I also want to think about it in terms of not just how the traditional, educator may assess it, but then how do regulators get comfortable with, like our State Board of Accountancy, that this conversation that Jim and I had, that I really came away with something like that?
I think I'm also a proponent of this also, Ralph, but I think initially it will be more of a formalized process than the casual process that you mentioned of you and Jim just having a discussion. As you can imagine, and again, an auditor out in the field has a tax issue. So he will be able to log on to a tax research, do research on a tax issue, and respond. So it's real world learning. And then he answers the question that he needs on the audit. So there will be maybe a digital badge that he has that he's going to log on to something. So I don't think it will start out being a casual conversation. I think it will be going to a site to find the information you need and then incorporating that right into the audit as you're sitting there. And it will monitor the time that you spend on there. It will have some type of assessment at the end. Did you understand what you just read? And then you'll get credit for that.
Interesting. Well, Jim, let me segue a little bit to you on this, because as our Chief Learning Officer and running a program, that the education foundation that we have here at the Society, how would we address real world learning? I mean, if we had like roundtables where we brought people in to talk to each other on a particular issue, do you see this real world learning concept, even though Steve embraces it and thinks it's a good thing, do you see that as something that our state board could get its arms around, or that we could be gravitating to here in the Society?
I think a lot is yet to be determined from a standard standpoint, a regulatory standpoint. The challenge, I think, from the regulation side is everything can't qualify for CPE. Everything can't qualify for credit. Yet, there is a way to expand what does qualify that makes a lot of real world sense. So for us in particular, I could see us having structured committee meetings where you have a real world forum where professionals gather. There will be topics that obviously are technical in nature, that some of the best CPE happens in those informal environments where professionals talk to each other about commonalities that are happening in the workplace.
And it's certainly something that our members traditionally liked, with some of the program that we run, that ability to come together, network, talk about, bring up issues that they have encountered, that there's nothing perhaps in black and white about it, but because somebody else may have experienced something similar, they can provide them what happened in their situation there. So this is just going to be an interesting. There's also this concept of blended learning, which is and let me swing back to you, Steve. In the college and university environment, are you using blended learning?
Yes, we are. As a matter of fact, in the article that I wrote, I interviewed a director of learning from McGraw-Hill. And so they're developing this now. And so their concept is, their product is called Learn Smart, but the student does Learn Smart before coming into class. It might be a 1-hour video that they're watching with some assessment questions they have to do before coming to class. And then when they come to class, they have some base knowledge of what it is that you're going to participate in. So first of all, for the instructor, it raises the level a little bit, that the people are a little bit more educated about the subject matter, and then you can still assess them afterwards. And I could see you having your classroom instruction here, but before the people come, they have to watch a video, a 1-hour video maybe, so they get an hour of credit for that. And they come into the class, the instructor could have assessment questions that, using some device, they could be answering questions and you could be gauging their learning.
So again, on the blended learning, you'd watch a video, you'd get credit for that element. Now, how would that be assessed? Would you have to answer questions or something at that point?
So they would have to, at the end of the video, yes, they would.
Or at the end of when you come together in the live facilitated session, would it all be combined together, or will you get a portion for the video and a portion for the facilitated?
So in McGraw-Hill's technology, you do an assessment on the video first, and then you do another assessment. So there's two different assessments.
Okay. All right. Well, I tell you. And Steve mentioned that he wrote an article for us. It's in I'll take the liberty to say it's in our NJCPA magazine. It's the January-February 2015 issue. So for those of you who perhaps maybe haven't read it, I challenge you to go back and read it. And if you have read it, go back and read it again, because it's got some really good comments and thoughts in here about the future of CPE delivery. Now I'm going to go back into my colleague and buddy here, Jim Hardenberg, and talk about some of the new learning infrastructure or models that are coming to pass. You know, certainly social media, the web, the internet have all put us in a new dimension. So what's going to be the impact on CPE and learning from a different platform these days?
I think generally, with the new standards that are coming out, nano learning as well as blended learning are part of the new CPE standards and will open up the door to new opportunities. The infrastructure that will be built around that is going to be similar to what young folks are seeing with YouTube and TED Talks and essentially the internet, bringing those capabilities to the table and then synergizing it into the learning environments that we're currently evolving to. And I would say that it's going to be a market reaction. There's going to be a market adjustment period where folks are going to sit down and see what works best for them. There's going to be multiple opportunities, and I can see it being a hybrid, some type of balancing or rebalancing of how folks take training. And I will have to say that I think that a live touch point, meaning people getting together face to face, will remain an important part of the future. People won't just learn on their own. They won't automatically digest on their own. They won't understand everything right out of the gate. And humans are people that get together. They get together and talk about these like-kind issues. And I could see classrooms getting shorter, maybe not an 8-hour format, but maybe it'll be a 4-hour format or a 2-hour format, where folks will get together and bring these infrastructures and leverage all of them together to bring learning and make it more personable.
What happens to self-study as a result of all of this? Because self-study's been here for a while with us. How do you see that changing, or will it change?
I see self-study as an area that has been around, as you say. It's been around since mandatory education began. It was all paper and pencil back then. I look at nano learning as frankly another mode of self-study, in my humble view, just a shorter increment. But I could see self-study being a part of the future. But again, I want to emphasize the part. It's not going to take over and be the only way. It's going to be a piece of the puzzle that people should learn on their own, read on their own, look at videos on their own, but then come together at the end of the day, whether it's internal at a company or firm, or together with us If at a state society we want to gather these professionals together, that's going to be how it works, I think.
So now, for the old guys like myself, I say seasoned, who've been accustomed to coming to live training, sitting for whether it's 2 hours, 4 hours, or 8 hours, where do you see live training kind of fading away into the sunset, or will there always be some opportunity for live training to remain in place? I mean, do you see us moving totally into this new delivery method, maybe sooner than later, or will live training always have a place, Jim? Do you think?
I think live training, as long as people exist, will always have a place. It's almost like when you look at the kids today, they still go to school, they still congregate together, and they still learn a lot from each other. They do more offline now because they can. They're always connected. Folks are always connected now. And the live portion of life, it's going to decline from a training perspective because there are so many opportunities now, so many virtual training opportunities. That's a natural reaction to the growth of internet and online training. But there's going to be always a need for people to get together, and I don't mean to say that over and over again, but I can feel it that's going to be the end game. It's going to be less than it is today, but it's not going to go away.
Okay, so Steve, let me flip back to you. As being in academia, do you see the model changing for academia? Do we see us? I know there are MOOCs out there, and that they're long distance learning programs. Are they going to kind of take over? And now, would you see a situation where maybe you do most of your training over the web or internet, and maybe do only 2 years in a residential environment? I mean, I've heard some people talk about that, and I sit on a couple of boards, accounting programs, and there's been some discussion about, will the virtual classroom take over for what we see today is the live classroom, where somebody's up in front of a whiteboard, actively teaching a group out there, or so. What do you foresee?
Well, I think do you know an organization like Phoenix University has 500,000 students, so they're very large, and that's all online. And so all colleges are looking at them and saying, how do we have to compete in the future and offer more online courses?
And we have our own here with I believe Thomas Edison is all online as well, right, here,
and
face to face.
And so there's a change that's already been in place for 10 years or so now. I think there's a place for the online classes. If you already have some idea about the course material, then online is fine. But if it's a brand new subject for you, it's hard to do online on something, doing it yourself. The theory is you could wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, right, and go online and learn something. But to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and do something that you don't know anything about is very difficult to do. So I think the colleges talk about it, they embrace it, but they're slow moving going forward, and they want to assess the value of it. And you're also trying to assess, just like we talk about the assessment tools we need for CPAs, you also have to assess if someone's taking an online course, that it's actually them that's taking the course, right? And so if you have all these students out there taking online courses, do you know who is the student on the other side taking that course? So that will be a challenge going forward. And if you don't mind, I want to get back to a point that Jim made about the need going forward. There's a real need for people to network and share ideas in a combined setting, blended learning, where you have that structured courses that people are taking, and then they get together at coffee breaks and the exhibit area to go into, and learning happens there as well. And you could meet an old friend and talk about an issue that comes up. So I think there will always be a value for those conventions where people of like mind come together and learning happens. I don't think they will be given us credit for some of those things, but it's a great opportunity for people to come together and talk about things that are happening in the practice.
Well, okay. Now, there's this term or phraseology called competency-based learning. And it's been tossed around from here to there versus what we have today of, I guess, compliance models where I take CPE or I take some sort of course because I have a requirement to do it. So I'll go to you, Jim, because this is Jim Hardenberg, who is on one of the task force that have been formed if you look at the future of learning. It's a NASBA task force, and we're very fortunate to have Jim on there, so he'll be at the forefront and have all the right answers and answers to all the questions. But have they talked about competency-based learning or the competency-based model? Can you?
We have.
Yeah. What is it? You hear these phraseologies and nomenclature. What is competency-based learning?
Well, it makes me chuckle somewhat when I hear this because, to me, CPE is synonymous with competency. You're supposed to take training that will enhance your competency. But I think what has happened too much so is that, as you mentioned, it became more of a compliance activity that was not the truest outcome that was hoped for. You're supposed to build your competence. Competency-based training, to me, is studying a body of knowledge to enhance and become competent in that body, meaning whether that's a tiered series of training in a certain technical area that then we'll pick on business valuation skills, taking a series of programs to become a business valuation specialist. And again, that's just an example. But I think from a competency standpoint, I often come back to that means testing of some kind. How do you ensure that you became competent in what you just learned, whether that's a digital badge, whether that's a self-study type of test at the end? I would hate to see testing become part of what the environment of CPE is in holistic terms, but that's not to say it won't be part of it at some point. At the end of the day, competence is what training is all about, is to build a competent workforce and have people out there serving clients and working for companies in a manner that is fulfilling their mandates.
So let me turn back to Steve here and say, in academia, are you looking at a competency type model or base as someone goes through a curriculum? Is it to build skill sets and enhance, or is it because I need to take accounting 1, accounting 2, a tax course?
What is changing, Ralph, is similar to what Jim just mentioned, that the accounting curriculum, they're saying at the end, when you get your bachelor's degree, what is the body of knowledge that you should have coming out? And for most students, it's, well, what do I need for the CPA exam, right? Correct? And so that's the body of knowledge that you need, which is a lot of information. But firms specifically are creating in-house subject matter experts. So in that article, I wrote about Eisner-Amper. So they created an Eisner-Amper University. And so for each of the departments, tax and audit and consultancy, they say the people in this group need to know this by the end of the year. They need to improve these skills by the end of the year. So they're creating subject matter for those. So everybody at Eisner-Amper doesn't take the same courses. You take it based on what work you're doing in the year and what knowledge do you need to achieve the objectives that the firm has. And so that's a change from before, where you just took your CPE, and at the end of the year you were rushing around, right, to pick up courses.
Compliance.
Right, yeah. It didn't tie into to something that you need for your job.
I feel like a dinosaur. I tell you with all this nomenclature, but it is something that's quite interesting. The other thing that has come about is this whole notion of customized content, where you bring together information that is segmented for different groups, like for the tax area, for the audit area, for consulting. What are your thoughts on this, on customized content? You see it expanding, or?
Yeah.
I see it expanding in the sense that I could see a nano library of videos that would be far and wide, that would cover different content areas and different topics that, dependent upon your level of skill, would be targeted for you. To get a 10-minute overview, get CPE credit for that. To kind of kill both needs at once, where you get credit for the learning you need right then, right there, to complete a task or complete a job or serve a client or complete something internally at a company. That's going to be a very powerful dynamic. Again, that's part of the process. I could see that being something that folks will use and then come together from time to time to talk about their body of knowledge and exactly what they're trying to accomplish within their skill set.
I agree, and I also think it's going to be increasing going forward, not decreasing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, with all of these changes, new delivery mechanisms, new approaches, new assessment type models, what's going to happen with the cost of CPE or education? From your standpoint, I've noticed some models where a university will offer the traditional, let's say, MBA, and then they'll offer an online MBA. But the online MBA is much cheaper than the traditional MBA. So is the online person getting less than the traditional person, or how does one kind of justify? I mean, where do you see costs? I mean, obviously, with new delivery mechanisms, we'll have to, employ new equipment, perhaps even a new center. Do you think it's going to have a dramatic increase on the cost of CPE to those individuals taking? And I keep saying CPE. Education from an academic standpoint, CPE from the profession standpoint. So let me first turn to you, Stephen, to see what you think in terms of the impact and cost of a college education. Because, I mean, I often look back at what I spent, and my daughter's at going to my alma mater, and what we're having to spend today, and I'm like, there's something wrong with this model.
Well, Ralph, I enjoy what Jim just said about this digital library in nanobytes. The advantage of that is it's inexpensive to produce those generally, and a person could watch a 10-minute video and he could watch it 4 times so he gets the information. So it takes him 40 minutes to go through it, where another person goes through it and watches it in 10 minutes and then understands the concept. So it gives flexibility to the person that's taking it. Where in a classroom that you're there for 1 hour, if you don't get it in the 1 hour, then you have to go back and try to find out how you obtain that information you're trying to do. It will always be more expensive to have a live person on there teaching it. For some people, their method of learning, they have to have a live instructor in front of them, and they can't do it from watching a YouTube video. But I think the firms are going to look at the spending that they have, how much are they spending on this, and try to find the most efficient way to deliver information and content out to their employees and assess to make sure the employees understand that. And they're going to look for the cheapest way possible. And that's going to be all these new tools like your nanobyte library that they're going to have.
Yeah. So what's it going to do in terms of our CPE model?
The challenge I think I come back to is competence is not cheap. Being good at anything seldom takes the cheapest road. Compliance is free. You can comply easily, whether you take free webinars or some type of free service. But free's been around too. I like to think that we've been successful, at least the State Society, because we haven't gone cheap. We haven't gone free. We have a cadre of offerings, to the inexpensive to the more expensive, but I could see the way that this will evolve is that the web-based training will have a price point and it'll have a value to it that'll be lower from this nanobyte library, maybe subscription type of model, right, to live training actually becoming more expensive because it will become more valuable. And it's going to be a value conversation that we have to have, where the people in the room, the time they spend there, it's got to be a return on that time. And the facilitating skills that used to be a lecturer per se is going to be a facilitator now that's going to draw out all the expertise in the room to synergize that for the people in the room. I could see that being more expensive, but it just won't be the same volume. It'll be a lower volume of programming with a higher value attached to it.
And again, I agree with that we will be looking for value and not looking just for compliance to do it, but the firms, again, want their staff members to increase in knowledge over the course of the year and gain competency. And we live in an evolving business environment, and your skills have to evolve also. And so how do they keep up with the business environment? They have to make sure that they always have skilled professionals out there in this changing environment. And so there will be a value greater than just the cost of the education. It's how do they do in the job. The value is going to come there.
Agreed.
So last thoughts on this the future of CPE delivery. What do you, I mean, obviously there's some pros to it. What do you see as for maybe some of the drawbacks or negativeness of it, or anything in your last couple of segments? So I'll go to our guest, our academician here, and get your perspective, Steve, and then I'll shift to you.
Well, Ralph, I think there needs to be high quality assessment tools. So however you do those to assess, are we doing a good job? Are we delivering value to the people? And it's those tools that will tell us whether the money that we're spending on content is getting through to the people. So I think that we will see many, many new assessment tools coming forward on how people are learning, and that we can ensure that they are learning the material that we want them to learn. That's what I think we'll see in the future.
Okay. Jim?
I would say stay tuned. There's going to be some new things on the horizon that we don't see right now. I think as the standards open and allow for more learning venues, more learning opportunities, this is all going to shift. And I believe within this shifting environment, the market will win. Folks will take training, look for the ROI on that training, and they won't come back to training that they don't see an ROI on their behalf. But I believe it's going to be a rebalancing within the whole environment of education and CPE as we know it, because compliance, again, is easy. It's the competence that's going to really drive this.
And there was one thing that just popped into my mind before we come to a close here. What happens to the content providers out here, the people who exist today? With all of the changes, do we see some consolidation perhaps taking place in content providers? And on the academic side, will we see some consolidation perhaps in terms of colleges and universities as a result of moving to these new delivery mechanisms and platforms? So again, Steve, what are your thoughts from the academic side?
I think there will be quite a bit of consolidation in the future. So the content providers, say the textbook companies, there's already been a movement of consolidation there to consolidate that content. And then in the universities, I think in the long term there will be a consolidation of the number of universities that we have in America. And there'll be, but in moving in that direction, I think you'll see a partnering where online courses are created by a group of universities. So it could be the New Jersey State University systems creates a whole online program where you can get a degree. And
so are these similar to like the MOOCs that we have out there?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct. And so, but that will bring about a consolidation and the way that we think about universities today.
Okay. And Jim, what do you
I think we'll have to, again, pick our spots and look at how state societies can work closer together, how state societies can work with the AICPA closer together, how content providers can come to the table, and yes, I believe there'll be some consolidation there too, because there's going to be a lot of programming that won't be at the same volume that it was before. Yet we'll have to have strategic alliances that help us bring content to the table in a new way. So it's going to be, and I've said this before, but stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts in the next 3 to 5 years.
This has been an interesting conversation. Clearly, although we don't know for sure what the future holds, it's clear that we can't wait till the future arrives before we start to think about and do something. and to plan for what's gonna happen. We need to certainly embrace the changes that are taking place, and look how we can, I guess, mold them and shape them to ensure that we are responsible to the needs of the profession, and more importantly, the individuals who are in the profession, and and also to the public, I think, to make sure that we're having folks out in this space that really know what they're doing, because the public we're the trusted advisors for the public these days. So I want to thank Steve McCarthy, our accounting lecturer at Kane University. Thanks, Steve, and a member of the NJCPA. Okay, I did the thing. The NJCPA. Okay, and our Chief Learning Officer, Jim Hardenberg, who is just great to have someone with the breadth of knowledge that Jim has. Been at this for more than 25 years.
Long
Jim?
time.
Long time. He doesn't want to talk. He's still a young-looking man, but he does a great job and really understands this space out here, and has done a good job in putting forth a great program and running our education foundation. So thank you both for joining me today and having this sort of like a fireside chat about what the future of a CPE and CPU delivery has to offer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.